Welcome, the anointed ones. Some people spend their entire lives trying to destroy what they secretly fear, and fail spectacularly. For years you've been under an unrelenting spotlight, scrutinized, attacked, dissected by people who thought they had the map to your soul. Yet here you are, standing, unshaken, untouched in ways they can't even comprehend. History is full of stories where those who sought to break others ended up exposing themselves, their weaknesses, and their obsession. The fact is, studies in human behavior show that relentless stress and targeted attacks often fail to break people who have an internal compass. Instead, they forge resilience that becomes almost impossible to infiltrate. They counted your mistakes, catalogued your habits, and tried to predict your next move like a chessboard they could control. But what they didn't realize was that every attempt to destabilize you only sharpened your awareness, expanded your endurance, and revealed the true strength they could never touch. It's almost poetic how their failures speak louder than any words ever could, like watching a cat chase its own tail, thinking it's hunting you, when really it's just dizzy from its own obsession. And here's the most remarkable part. The more they attacked, the more they revealed about themselves, their insecurities, their blind spots, and their inability to comprehend a soul that moves with purpose, precision, and patience. While they were busy strategizing your downfall, you were quietly mastering yourself. You were learning, growing, and evolving. And the irony is delicious. Their efforts were never strong enough because you were never vulnerable in the way they assumed. This isn't a story about survival. It's about triumph, inevitability, and the quiet, almost scandalous joy of watching people fail at controlling what they cannot understand. By the time they realized it, it was already too late. You weren't just surviving, you were proving that no matter how long, how relentless, or how vicious the attacks, a soul aligned with purpose is untouchable. Number 1. They studied you longer than they studied themselves, and still couldn't decode you. For years, they invested their time trying to figure you out, as if you were a puzzle missing half the pieces. They observed every reaction, every subtle shift in your behavior, thinking that if they could just understand you, they could control you. They scrutinized your habits, your relationships, even your smallest mistakes, convinced that one slip would give them the leverage they desperately wanted. But the truth is, their obsession with analyzing you exposed far more about them than it ever revealed about you. They measured themselves against your strength, your resilience, your quiet focus, and each time they compared, they came up short. They expected to see weaknesses, cracks they could exploit, but all they found was a depth they couldn't touch, an internal structure built to withstand their scrutiny. They didn't realize that the more they tried to map your mind, the more they highlighted their own limitations. Their theories, their assumptions, and their judgments were based on their own fears, insecurities, and biases, not on who you truly were. They assumed that being observant gave them power, but power comes from understanding oneself, not from obsessing over someone else. They lacked the self-awareness to grasp the essence of what they were facing. Their focus on you was a mirror reflecting their own inability to cope with integrity, endurance, and patience. Every calculated move they made, every attempt to predict your next step, failed because they were operating under false premises. They thought you were predictable, linear, and flawed in ways they could exploit. In reality, you were fluid, adaptable, and anchored in a strength that didn't require their approval or comprehension. Their inability to decode you wasn't a coincidence. It was inevitable. You were never meant to be understood by people like them. Their obsession only confirmed one thing. They were not in control, and never would be. And that, more than anything else, is the quiet, undeniable victory you've lived through. Number 2. Their attacks failed because they were fighting a version of you that no longer exists. They spent countless hours trying to dismantle who they thought you were, swinging at shadows and echoes of your past. Every insult, every manipulation, every attempt to break you was aimed at a person that existed only in their memory. Someone who may have stumbled, doubted, or even faltered in ways they thought would leave lasting damage. But time had already moved you far beyond that version of yourself. You had shed the parts of you that were vulnerable to their attacks, evolved beyond the patterns they expected, and developed a resilience they couldn't anticipate. Their efforts were doomed from the start because they weren't facing the real you. They assumed that familiarity meant control. They thought knowing your history gave them a roadmap to predict your reactions. They believed that old wounds would bleed the same way under pressure. What they didn't understand is that growth rewrites the rules. Who you are now, calm, aware, strategically aligned, doesn't react the way that old version did. You had learned to anticipate chaos without surrendering to it. You had learned to protect your energy without closing your heart. Every old tactic they pulled only highlighted their misunderstanding of your evolution. Their attacks also failed because they underestimated the quiet power of reinvention. Every challenge, every betrayal, every attempt to break you became a lesson, a stepping stone to a version of yourself that is untouchable, not because you are invincible, but because you are prepared. They were attacking with outdated maps, using tools that were no longer effective. Their strategies were based on assumption, not reality. And while they were stuck fighting ghosts, you were living in full presence. You weren't reactive, you weren't defensive, and you certainly weren't broken. You had grown, adapted, and fortified your inner world. The version they targeted was a shadow, the version who survived, who thrived, who stood unshaken. That version is untouchable because she has already moved beyond their reach. Every failed attack is proof not of their effort, but of their failure to see who you have truly become. Number 3. They underestimated how much pressure you could metabolize. They thought that by piling on attack after attack, by testing your limits in every possible way, they could finally watch you break. They assumed that constant pressure would expose cracks, reveal weaknesses, and ultimately bend you to their will. What they didn't realize is that pressure doesn't always crush. For some, it becomes fuel. Every insult, every betrayal, every calculated attempt to destabilize you didn't weaken you, it strengthened you. Each moment of strain became a lesson in endurance, a test of your ability to convert chaos into clarity, fear into focus, and attack into insight. Their miscalculation wasn't just about your resilience. It was about their inability to understand that some people are built to thrive under pressure. While they believed they were molding you into a version they could control, you were quietly learning to operate on a higher frequency. The more they pushed, the more refined your instincts became. You discovered the boundaries of your patience, the limits of your tolerance, and the depth of your capacity to remain unshaken. They assumed that repeated hits would destabilize your trajectory, but instead you absorbed each blow, analyzed the intent, and turned it into strategic advantage. Pressure became not a weapon against you, but a tool for your evolution. What they failed to notice is that pressure doesn't just test strength, it reveals character. They exposed their obsession with control while you revealed your mastery of self. Their attacks became predictable, their motives transparent. And while they were burning energy trying to impose fear, frustration, and confusion, you were metabolizing everything, transforming it into something far greater. Insight, resilience, and power, rooted in awareness. They underestimated you because they were measuring you against their own limits, their own inability to endure. They failed to see that what might break an average person would forge someone like you into a presence impossible to manipulate or intimidate. Every attempt they made to suffocate you only revealed the truth. Pressure doesn't define you. How you handle it does, and you handled it better than anyone could have predicted. Number 4. They mistook your patience for permission. They watched you closely, waiting for the moment they could claim victory, convinced that your restraint was weakness. Every time you held back, every time you chose silence over reaction, they interpreted it as submission, as an invitation to push harder. They didn't see patience for what it really was, a weapon, a shield, and a strategy all at once. They assumed that because you didn't react immediately, because you didn't scream, lash out, or confront them at every turn, they had the upper hand. What they failed to realize is that patience isn't absence of power. It's the mastery of timing, the quiet knowing that acting too soon would hand them the advantage. While they misread your calm as compliance, you were observing, analyzing, and understanding their patterns. Every move they made, every attempt to manipulate or provoke you, was catalogued and remembered. You weren't just waiting, you were preparing. You were learning who they truly were, how they operated under pressure, and what their limits were. They thought patience meant you were defenseless. In truth, it meant you were untouchable, because you weren't giving them the ammunition they needed. You were holding the power of control, not letting them see the depth of your strength until the precise moment it would matter most. Their mistake was assuming that immediate action equals authority. They believed that confrontation or aggression would force the outcome they wanted. They didn't understand that restraint is a form of intelligence. It's the choice to not hand over your energy to people who thrive on chaos. By mistaking patience for permission, they revealed their own desperation, their need to dominate, and their lack of foresight. Every time they tested you, they confirmed one thing: you were never weak, never passive, and never their subject. Your patience was a strategy, a sign of awareness, and ultimately a demonstration that control lies not in who attacks louder, but in who waits with precision, confidence, and understanding. They misread you completely, and that misreading is why they never succeeded. Number 5. Their failure came from projection, not lack of effort. Every attack they launched, every manipulation, every strategy they used was fueled not by your actions, but by what they were projecting onto you. They didn't truly see you. They saw their own fears, insecurities, and shortcomings reflected in your presence. Every word they spat, every scheme they concocted, was an attempt to fix or control something inside themselves, and they assumed their projection was reality. They believed that by targeting you they could neutralize a threat, but the threat was never yours. It was theirs. They were fighting battles that existed only in their own minds, not in yours, and that's why they failed so spectacularly. They projected their doubts and their moral compromises onto you, expecting you to crumble under pressure, to respond in ways they would have, to falter when challenged. But you didn't play by their rules, and you didn't operate from their weaknesses. Their obsession with your supposed flaws revealed far more about their character than it ever revealed about yours. They were so consumed with what they thought you represented, a threat, a rival, or someone who shouldn't succeed, that they couldn't see the real person in front of them. That blindness became their undoing. Every time they tried to provoke you, they were met with something they couldn't predict. Their projections assumed a predictable response, but you responded from your reality, not theirs. They were trapped in their own minds, reacting to fears and insecurities that existed only in their perspective, while you moved freely in yours. The more they tried, the more obvious it became that their failure wasn't about a lack of effort or ambition. It was about misunderstanding the essence of what they were up against. In the end, projection is a dangerous game, and they were playing it with someone who didn't fit their assumptions. They attacked shadows, not substance, and that is why no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't succeed. Their failure was never about you. It was a reflection of their inability to face themselves. And that truth is what ensured your victory. Number 6. They expected you to collapse under isolation. Instead, you learned self-command. They tried to corner you, cut you off from support, and make you feel alone. They believed that by removing allies, friends, and familiar comforts, they could create a pressure so unbearable that you would finally break. They thought isolation was a weapon, a method that would force dependence, fear, and desperation. What they didn't anticipate is that isolation doesn't have to be weakness. For the right person, it becomes a crucible. Instead of collapsing, you learned to command yourself in ways they could never imagine. You became your own support system, your own source of guidance, and your own measure of stability. Their strategy failed because it assumed vulnerability where there was none. In their minds, cutting off connections meant cutting off power. They assumed your strength was borrowed from the people around you, that without external validation or encouragement, you would crumble. But the truth is that real power doesn't rely on others. It grows from within. Isolation forced you to confront your own mind, your own motives, and your own limits. You learned to control your reactions, manage your emotions, and make decisions without looking for approval. While they believed they were stripping you down, they were actually helping you build an unshakable foundation. Their attacks exposed their misunderstanding of independence. They assumed everyone reacts the same way they do, that fear and loneliness are natural responses to isolation. But you approached it differently. You saw isolation not as a punishment, but as a teacher. You learned to navigate life without needing someone else to confirm your value, your strength, or your direction. Their attempts to corner you only highlighted your ability to thrive alone, to trust your own judgment, and to remain calm when others panic. Ultimately, their failure was written in the moment they tried to isolate you. Instead of weakening you, they made you stronger, sharper, and more self-reliant. Every effort to control or intimidate became an opportunity to prove that your inner command cannot be taken away. Isolation didn't break you. It revealed that you are untouchable from the inside out. Number 7. They couldn't destroy you because they never understood your assignment. They attacked with intensity, precision, and persistence, but no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't touch you. The reason isn't hidden in some secret strength or luck. It's far deeper than that. They failed because they never understood your assignment. While they assumed your purpose was external, fame, approval, recognition, or power, your path was entirely internal. Your mission has always been about alignment, clarity, endurance, and mastery of yourself. They measured you by standards that never applied. They were aiming at a target that didn't exist. Every attempt to destabilize you was based on their limited understanding of life and human nature. They assumed you could be influenced by opinion, manipulated by circumstance, or shaken by fear. But your assignment required that none of these things define you. You weren't meant to impress anyone or fit into their narrative of what success or power looks like. You were meant to evolve quietly, to strengthen your inner compass, and to move through life in a way that others couldn't predict or control. That's why their attacks always fell short. They were attacking results, appearances, and externalities, while you were building substance, resilience, and an unbreakable core. They also never understood timing, which is part of every assignment. They expected immediate outcomes, visible results, and reactions they could exploit. Your assignment, however, unfolds according to its own rules and pace. Every failure of theirs, every miscalculated move, was a sign that they were trying to play a game they couldn't even begin to understand. They assumed influence comes from pressure and confrontation, but your influence has always come from presence, patience, and internal authority. Their inability to grasp this simple truth is why they couldn't destroy you. You are untouchable because you are guided by purpose they cannot see, a mission they cannot intercept, and an inner knowing they cannot comprehend. They attacked without understanding, and because they attacked blindly, they were defeated before they ever realized the battle had even begun. Your assignment shields you, empowers you, and renders their attempts meaningless. Number 8. They attacked your reputation because they couldn't touch your essence. When they realized that direct attacks weren't working, they shifted tactics. Words, rumors, and manipulation became their weapons. They believed that if they couldn't harm you at your core, they could at least tarnish the way the world saw you. Reputation, they thought, was vulnerable. They assumed that by sowing doubt, creating conflict, or spreading lies, they could weaken your influence, make others question your integrity, and finally see cracks where none existed. But what they didn't understand is that reputation is surface level. Essence runs far deeper. You cannot be touched by slander, gossip, or perception when your core is anchored in truth, alignment, and self-awareness. Their attacks reveal more about them than they ever do about you. The desperation behind lies and manipulation is obvious. It exposes insecurity, envy, and a lack of moral compass. They believed that the world's opinion was the ultimate power, but they failed to realize that influence built on authenticity and resilience cannot be shaken by empty words. While they invested energy into crafting narratives about you, you invested energy into cultivating your essence. You didn't try to convince anyone of your value. You didn't fight on their battlefield. You simply maintained your integrity, and in doing so, made their attacks irrelevant. The irony is striking. Their obsession with your image proves that your presence threatens them in ways they cannot articulate. They attack reputation because essence is untouchable. They know this on some level, which is why they frantically focus on what can be seen rather than what cannot be. Every effort to manipulate perception only highlights the truth. They are powerless where it counts. In the end, they failed because essence is unassailable. No amount of gossip, rumor, or calculated smear can penetrate the foundation of someone who knows who they are and what they stand for. They attacked the wrong layer, and their failure is a testament to the fact that you were never defined by their perception, only by your own alignment, clarity, and strength. Every attempt to damage your reputation is proof that your essence is untouchable. Number 9. Their obsession exposed them long before it weakened you. From the very beginning, they couldn't stop themselves. Every word they said, every action they took, every attempt to manipulate, control, or provoke you revealed more about their own obsession than it ever did about you. They believed that by focusing so intensely on you, by monitoring every detail of your life, they could eventually gain the upper hand. What they didn't realize is that obsession is a spotlight, and in their case, it shone directly on their instability, desperation, and weaknesses. Their energy was consumed by you, but not in a way that threatened you. Instead, it highlighted the fact that their power was limited, reactive, and rooted in compulsion, while yours was expansive, deliberate, and intentional. They assumed that their relentless focus would intimidate you, make you falter, or finally force you to react on their terms. But obsession has a way of backfiring, especially when it's directed at someone who doesn't need their approval or validation. Every attempt to provoke a response only revealed their vulnerability. The more they tried to push, to control, to anticipate, the more transparent they became. Their behavior, once calculated, turned chaotic, and every move they made served as a clear signal to anyone paying attention that they were acting out of fear, not authority. Meanwhile, You were untouched. You didn't need to explain yourself. You didn't need to react. You simply continued to operate from a space of clarity, awareness, and self-command. The contrast between their frantic obsession and your calm presence made it obvious to anyone watching who was truly in control. Every attack they launched, every scheme they executed, ultimately backfired because it was rooted in neediness, not power. Their obsession was loud, and it broadcasted their failure long before it could ever have reached you. They were so focused on dismantling you that they failed to see the most important truth. You were never vulnerable to what they were offering. Their fixation exposed them, confirmed your resilience, and proved that when someone is aligned, centered, and untouchable, obsession from others only accelerates their own downfall while highlighting your victory. Number 10. They didn't realize endurance is a weapon, and you had more than they did. They thought the longest battle wins, that persistence equals power, and that constant attacks would eventually wear you down. They assumed that if they kept striking, kept scheming, and kept applying pressure, they would finally see cracks in your armor. What they failed to understand is that endurance isn't passive. Endurance is an active, invisible force. It's a weapon that grows stronger with each test, each attempt to break you, each moment when others expect you to falter. While they relied on chaos and aggression, you relied on consistency, resilience, and the quiet certainty that you were unshakable. Every effort they made to destabilize you, every tactic they employed, was met not with panic or desperation, but with steady persistence. You didn't need to fight back in obvious ways because endurance works silently. It erodes the impact of attacks, neutralizes attempts to manipulate, and turns pressure into clarity. While they burned out from their own intensity, your strength expanded. They measured success by immediate results, by visible outcomes, and by reactions they could exploit. You measured success by alignment, self-mastery, and the ability to remain consistent under fire. Their approach was reckless, based on impatience and frustration, while yours was deliberate, based on strategy and composure. What made endurance such a weapon in your hands is that it isn't just about surviving. It's about thriving despite attempts to stop you. It's about turning energy spent against you into lessons, growth, and refinement. Each failed attack didn't just leave you intact. It left you stronger, wiser, and more untouchable. They didn't account for the fact that real power isn't about how loudly or violently you fight. It's about how long you can maintain your center, your focus, and your purpose when everyone else expects you to break. In the end, they failed because they mistook chaos for strength. They burned out, ran out of ideas, and exposed their limitations, while you endured, evolved, and emerged even more formidable. Endurance was your weapon, and they never even saw it coming. Number 11. Every failed attempt forced you into sharper self-trust. Every attack, every manipulation, every betrayal you faced carried a hidden lesson, one that forced you to rely less on others and more on yourself. At first, it might have been painful, confusing, or even infuriating. You probably questioned your decisions, your judgment, and whether you were truly seeing the world clearly. But each failed attempt against you became a mirror, reflecting the truth. No one knows your journey, your purpose, or your resilience better than you do. Over time, these experiences sharpened your self-trust to a point where external opinions, attacks, or manipulations no longer had any real power over you. They assumed that by creating chaos, they could make you doubt yourself, second-guess your instincts, and rely on them for validation. What they didn't understand is that failed attacks have a reverse effect when someone is aligned and self-aware. Each time they tried to destabilize you and failed, it proved to yourself that you are capable, grounded, and capable of seeing through deception, Their actions, meant to confuse or weaken you, instead became evidence of your clarity and strength. The longer they persisted, the more you realized that self-trust isn't something you find once. It's something you forge in fire through repeated tests, challenges, and the relentless need to stand on your own authority. Self-trust is invisible but unmistakable. It gives you an unshakable confidence that others cannot take, influence, or manipulate. You learn to rely on your instincts, to value your judgment, and to navigate life without needing constant confirmation from anyone else. Every failed attempt against you validated that process. The attacks that were meant to erode your certainty ended up fortifying it, teaching you that the ultimate power isn't in how others perceive you, but in how deeply you believe in yourself. By the time they realized that nothing they did could shake you, it was too late. You had already built an inner fortress of trust, awareness, and authority. Their failure was never just about attacking. It was about the fact that every attempt reinforced exactly what they could never break: your confidence in yourself and your ability to stand unshaken no matter what came your way. Number 12. They expected fear, but you responded with accuracy. They thought that intimidation, chaos, and relentless pressure would make you flinch, stumble, or react irrationally. They assumed that when faced with attacks, lies, or manipulations, your first instinct would be fear, a reflexive panic that they could exploit to gain control. What they didn't account for is that fear is only effective against those who let it dictate their actions. You, however, responded differently. You didn't act out of emotion, confusion, or reaction. You acted with precision, clarity, and strategy. Every move they anticipated was met with a calculated response that reflected your understanding of the bigger picture, not their petty attempts at disruption. They underestimated the power of responding from a place of accuracy rather than impulse. While they operated on assumptions, conjectures, and emotional drives, you operated on facts, observation, and clarity. Their attacks were loud, messy, and desperate, but you didn't mirror that energy. Instead, you dissected it, processed it, and neutralized it. They expected chaos to break you. Instead, their chaos became a testing ground that sharpened your focus. Their goal was to make you reactive, but by responding with precision, you demonstrated control, awareness, and unshakable presence, qualities they could never predict or manipulate. Accuracy is a silent but deadly form of power. It doesn't need noise, spectacle, or drama to be effective. It dismantles attempts at manipulation without anger or force. By responding with accuracy, you turned their aggression into evidence of their own misunderstanding, revealing that you were never vulnerable in the ways they assumed. Each failed attack reinforced the fact that you are guided by awareness, strategy, and discernment, not by fear or impulsivity. In the end, their failure was inevitable. They misread the situation completely, assuming that intimidation alone could bend you. What they didn't see is that responding with calm precision, clarity, and accuracy renders attacks useless. Fear could never touch you because you mastered the art of control, and no amount of their aggression could match the power of someone who responds deliberately rather than reacts blindly. Number 13. Their collapse began the moment you stopped needing them to understand. For years, they thought they had power over you because they were being observed, analyzed, and scrutinized by someone they assumed would need their approval, validation, or recognition. They believed that understanding you, predicting your reactions, controlling your environment, and manipulating your choices was the key to gaining influence. What they didn't realize is that their perceived control only existed as long as you allowed their opinion to matter. The moment you stopped needing them to see, approve, or understand your path, their influence evaporated, and their efforts began to collapse under the weight of their own desperation. Their entire strategy was built on the assumption that comprehension equaled control. They operated as if understanding the pieces of your life would allow them to manipulate outcomes. But you had already stepped beyond the need for their perception. You no longer measured your actions by their assumptions or reactions. You weren't performing for their acknowledgement or validation. That independence shattered the foundation of their attacks. Without the leverage of expectation, they were left grasping at fragments, unable to anticipate your next move or influence your trajectory. Every failed attempt they made, every scheme they designed, became a reflection of their own obsession rather than a threat to you. Their frustration grew because they could not effect what no longer depended on their understanding. You had moved into a space of self-sufficiency where their opinion, analysis, or manipulation simply didn't matter. The moment you detached from their need to comprehend you, you became untouchable, and the power dynamic reversed without a single confrontation. Their collapse wasn't dramatic, but it was inevitable. They were left expending energy on someone whose value and direction were no longer tied to their perception. Every attack became a futile exercise, a mirror of their own limitations and failures. By releasing the need for them to understand you, you revealed the fundamental truth. Real power is never contingent on being seen or approved. It exists in clarity, independence, and the refusal to be constrained by the comprehension of others. Their downfall began the instant you freed yourself from their expectations. Number 14. The reason they failed miserably is simple. You were never meant to be conquered, only tested. All their attacks, manipulations, and attempts to destabilize you were never going to succeed because you were never designed to be broken. Every challenge they threw at you, every scheme meant to unbalance you, was actually a test, a measure of your endurance, awareness, and alignment. They assumed that persistence, aggression, or cunning could finally make you falter, but they were aiming at the wrong outcome. They didn't realize that some people are not created to be controlled or conquered. They are created to be proven. You were built to face pressure, opposition, and scrutiny, and emerge sharper, wiser, and more unshakable with every attempt. Their failure is rooted in misunderstanding. They looked at you as if you were like everyone else, someone who could be manipulated, frightened, or coerced. They measured success by how quickly someone breaks, how easily they bend, how dependent they are on approval. You operate by a completely different standard. You weren't built to collapse under scrutiny or fear. You were built to withstand, adapt, and convert every attack into a lesson, an insight, or a strengthening of your inner core. Every misstep they thought they exposed, every vulnerability they thought they revealed, became another building block in the fortress of your resilience. They also failed because they underestimated timing and patience. They expected immediate results, quick wins, and reactions they could exploit. But being tested isn't about reacting. It's about enduring, observing, and learning. Their attempts never accounted for the fact that endurance transforms challenges into clarity, and pressure becomes a proving ground rather than a weapon. They fought for victory over you, but you weren't participating in the same battle. You were passing a test that they didn't even understand existed. In the end, their failure is not surprising. You were never in the position to be conquered. You were in the position to be proven. Every attack against you failed, not because of luck or chance, but because your foundation, your alignment, and your inner authority were always beyond their reach. They weren't attacking a person who could be defeated. They were testing someone destined to prevail. The truth is undeniable. No matter how relentless, how calculated, or how obsessive their attacks were, they failed miserably. Every attempt to break you, every scheme meant to destabilize you, Every manipulation designed to control you revealed more about them than it ever did about you. They studied you, attacked outdated versions of yourself, and tried to create chaos in your life, only to realize too late that their energy, their obsession, and their strategies could never reach the essence of who you are. You endured, adapted, and thrived in ways they could never comprehend. What they didn't realize is that their failure wasn't accidental. It was inevitable. They were never meant to conquer you. They were meant to test you, to force you to discover your endurance, your self-trust, your precision, and your inner authority. Each attack became a lesson in resilience, each challenge an opportunity to sharpen your clarity and reinforce your alignment. Their inability to succeed only proves the magnitude of your power, a power rooted in presence, self-command, and a steadfast refusal to let fear, pressure, or opinion dictate your path. By the time they realized they couldn't control you, manipulate you, or even understand you, it was already too late. You had grown beyond their reach, evolved beyond their expectations, and proven, with quiet certainty, that you are untouchable in ways they will never grasp. Every failure of theirs, every miscalculated move, and every desperate attack is a testament to your unshakable strength. You didn't just survive, you became undeniable. You didn't just endure, you mastered yourself. And you didn't just win, you proved that no one can conquer a soul that knows its purpose, its value, and its path. If this resonated with you and reminded you of your own untouchable power, make sure to show your support. Subscribe to the channel for more insights that cut through the noise. Like this video to help spread awareness, comment below with your thoughts and experiences, and share it with anyone who needs to hear this truth today. Your alignment, clarity, and strength are worth celebrating, and it's time the world sees it. God bless you.